which wide receivers should be in your lineup and who should be on the bench for Week 13. We're about to tell you. Welcome back, Fantasy Endgame community. I'm Pierre. He's Chris. We're here to talk about wide receivers for every game of Week 13 for fantasy football. That's right, we're going to break down each matchup and tell you how we feel about all these receivers. Don't forget, there are two teams that are not playing. That would be the Cardinals and the Panthers. Let's get this out of the way. There's some receivers you don't even have to ask about. They should be in your lineup no matter what. Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Amon-Ra St. Brown, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase if he played. All right, let's begin with the Thursday night game. That would be the Bills at the Patriots. Gabe Davis didn't quite go off against the Lions on Turkey Day. How does he fare in New England?
Probably not good. I mean, 2 weeks in a row, I said you got to roll with him. These are great matchups. He can explode. He did nothing. Now he gets a terrible matchup. Don't look at what Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen did. This isn't the same. I'm not starting Gabe Davis this week.
Bad matchup, bad situation. Yeah, this is the time to bench Gabe. Look, if you really feel a big game from him coming, you know what, go for it. I'm not. Everywhere I have him, he's on my bench this week. Isaiah McKenzie did have a big game against the Lions. Are you going to read anything into that? Do you think that being the slot guy helps him against New England, or is that more of an outlier?
I think it's more of an outlier. Remember, didn't he do this earlier in the year, and then everybody threw him in their lineups, and he did nothing? This is just kind of what he does once or twice a year. I'm not starting him this week again in a bad matchup.
Yeah, I'm not starting him either. Again, there's some receivers, like you said, that'll have their moments, but there's no consistency here from him. There's no guarantee he gets any sort of usage target increase here. He's just a flex, desperation flex, and you really shouldn't need to be that desperate this week. And then New England's really the only receiver still worth talking about is Jacoby Myers against Buffalo. What do you think he does?
I don't know. Man, so disappointing, Jacoby Myers, but I'm not going to say you have to sit him. The Buffalo defense definitely banged up coming into this game, so I'm going to say if you need him, you can start him, but not a must start.
Well, it's interesting because you look and you're kind of surprised how many yards Mac Jones threw for last week. But Myers didn't have a huge game. We saw guys like Parker get some downfield passes. Of course, they're dumping off to the running backs a lot. There's a lot more guys getting involved, so I can't feel great about Myers. He's kind of a flex only if you need. Steelers at the Falcons. You know this is a great matchup for wide receivers, but do you think that means George Pickens should be in lineups?
Yeah, I can't say a must start for George Pickens. He's still got Kenny Pickett, but this defense is so bad. You want to get guys in there, so I'll say a good start.
I'll call him more of a, high priority flex option. Again, you don't force him in there just because of the matchup, because he still needs to have that connection from the quarterback, but I think he is a good option. Definitely some upside there. And then Deontay Johnson, maybe finally some signs of life from Monday night, but again, based on the matchup, do you feel bold enough to start him?
At least Pickens we know has the big playability, but for Deontay Johnson, only because of the matchup, I'm going to say if you need him, you can start him, but definitely not a must start.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Again, let's not get carried away with things. Again, the upside, we always say this, you need a guy who can get you those big point totals. That's what wins you weeks. Deontay is just not there, not with Kenny Pickett at least. And then I think we still kind of have to talk about Drake London because he's technically the top receiver in Atlanta, but does that even matter anymore?
No, this is a great matchup, but I don't even care. I'm not starting Drake London.
No, you can't. It's touchdown or bust, and even we saw the last couple of weeks, he would score a touchdown and get 20 yards with it. No, he's getting other receivers involved like Zacchaeus, and no, I'm out on Atlanta. Broncos at the Ravens. Look, if I'm out on Atlanta, I will say this again, and I'll probably keep saying it the rest of the year. I want no part of this Denver offense. Cortland Sutton, look, good player, can't do it. He's on my bench.
Man, I get not wanting to start him, but the guy had 13 and a half PPR points. He dropped a touchdown. He still has a very high floor. I can't sit. I'm not going to say you have to sit him. I'm not going to say you have to start him either, but I'm going to say if you need him, if you're looking for a high floor, you can start him.
All right, so you know the answer to this next question. But look, Jerry Jeudy has missed some time. If he does come back, Do you think he has any sort of floor?
Nah, first game back from injury in this offense, not trusting him in my lineup. I will sit him and see how he does.
Yeah, I honestly am just going to say I would sit him for the rest of the season for the most part. Packers taking on the Bears. This would seem to be a smash spot, but is Aaron Rodgers going to be playing? And even if he does, is he going to be anything close to 100%? So with that said, how do you treat Allen Lazard?
I mean, I think you have to start Allen Lazard, even if it's Jordan Love. Obviously, there's some risk here. We don't know the connection with, Love and Lazard like we do with Rodgers and Lazard, but it's a good matchup. He gets targeted. I'm not going to say he's a must start, but I think he's still a good start this week.
Yeah, he hasn't been, as involved as I would like. And again, there's still a lot of uncertainty here, so I don't feel huge numbers from the passing game. I think you could flex him, but there's just a lot of risk here. So I think he's flex worthy, but that's about it. Now, Christian Watson, I mean, at this point, do we even question it? Don't you have to just put him in your lineup?
Yeah, it almost feels like Thanos here, like I am inevitable, right? Because the game, it's not going well. He's doing nothing. Aaron Rodgers is hurt. And then Jordan Love comes in, hits him on like a crosser, and he takes it to the house and saves his day. Like at this point, you just have to start him until this hot streak ends. Yeah, you have to start him.
Yeah, you can't even question it. Just put him in your lineup, until he stops doing what he's doing. Even with Jordan Love, he did it. So, yeah, you have to start him, especially against the Bears. Randall Cobb, not so much.
No, only if Aaron Rodgers plays. And even then, really don't want to start Randall Cobb. So I'm just going to say no.
Yeah, I'll say no because, again, even though Rodgers says I'll play until I fall apart on the field, he's got a broken thumb, his ribs and whatever, and he's not like he's looking great anyway, so I'll say no to Cobb. And then we do know that for the Bears, Darnell Mooney, ankle injury, out probably for the season. Does that mean Chase Claypool now has fantasy relevance?
Maybe, probably, but we need Fields to play, and also this is not a great matchup against the Packers secondary. A.J. Brown didn't do a whole lot. Devonta Smith didn't do a whole lot. I think it's going to be a Montgomery game. I'm not starting Chase Claypool.
I'm not starting Claypool anyways. I really wasn't that interested in him when he was with Pittsburgh. And I'm talking even last year when he had Ben Roethlisberger. Look, maybe something happens and develops like a chemistry with Fields and next year, but not this year. I'm out on him. Jags at the Lions. Christian Kirk took a back seat this past week, even though he was in a good spot. But now he gets the Lions. Is it a bounce back game?
I mean, it should be. I think you got to roll with him again. It's too good of a matchup. I think you have to start Christian Kirk.
We always say this with guys specifically like Kirk. It's going to be pretty much all or nothing. I'm going to take a chance and say it's going to be all this week. Going with him as a boom, I think you have to start him and take a shot on him. Now, what about Zay Jones? Because maybe, just maybe, Trevor Lawrence has kind of found his groove finally and gets a smash spot against Detroit. Do you put Zay Jones in your lineup?
I do. I'm not going to say a must start, but I think he's a good start. He's had double-digit targets in each of the last two games. It's a good matchup. I think if you got Zay Jones, you start him.
And I'll tell you, look, I would put Zay Jones, again, not saying you have to start him, but I would put him over Allen Lazard. I would put him in my lineup over Courtland Sutton. I think there's more upside there, and that's what I'm going to take a shot on. Cleveland is going to Houston. We know how that game is going to play out. But let's say in Deshaun Watson's first game, is Amari Cooper going to have the same level of success?
Maybe, maybe not, but you got to start Amari Cooper. I mean, he's just one of these guys you have to put him in your lineup every single week and take whatever you get because the upside is just too high.
Well, ever since that whole road game split thing was put to bed, I think we can just say you kind of have to start Cooper unless your team is stacked at receiver. Especially in this matchup, there's really no thinking about it. Must start. Now, given the fact that it's the Texans and they should be getting a quarterback upgrade, does that make Donovan Peoples-Jones more interesting?
I think so. It's a good matchup. We'll see how Deshaun Watson looks, but still, I think I'm not going to say you have to start Peoples-Jones, but if you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, I mean, I like him a lot more better than last week, but still, he's still just a flex play. There's a risk there. Obviously, we know he's got some upside, but again, I wouldn't go crazy for him. I got him a little bit below, like Zay Jones, for example. Flexible, but only if you need him. And then on the Houston side, still got Brandon Cooks. Still not doing much for you. Does anything change this week?
No, Kyle Allen, Davis Mills, doesn't matter. I'm not starting Brandon Cooks.
Nah, there's really no need to start Brandon Cooks. I can sit him. And then Nico Collins, I mean, he did get a fair amount of targets from Kyle Allen last week, but still, I think he's only more of a desperation flex.
Even then, he got targets, but they're Kyle Allen targets. No, not starting Nico Collins either.
Jets at the Vikings. Look, if you believe that Mike White is the second coming of insert your favorite quarterback here, then you've got to love Garrett Wilson. But do you love Garrett Wilson this week against the Vikings?
Yeah, very good matchup, bad secondary. Look, in the games of Flacco or Mike White, basically the games where quarterback was not named Zach Wilson, he's been pretty good in most of them. So against the Vikings, I'm starting him.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't think it matters necessarily who the quarterback is, as long as it's not Zach Wilson. So you've got to take a shot with Wilson. We see how good he is. We've seen his upside. I think he's a must-start this matchup. Now, Elijah Moore, I did mention he's worth stashing. Do you think he's worth starting?
No, I can't do it yet. It's not like he got peppered with targets. You know, he hit on that long play, but that was really it. Let me see it one more time before I trust him in my lineups. I'm not starting him yet.
Yeah, I think you got to take the wait-and-see approach. I'd be really interested to see if his target share goes up this game. Because remember, he had that long touchdown, but he only caught 2 passes. So, bench for now. I'll say don't start him, but keep a close eye. And if you do have room, I would go ahead and pick him up and keep him as a bench stash. And then on the Vikings side, look, Adam Thielen finally did something last week. It was in a good, pretty good spot against that defense. So, do you think against this Jets defense, he gets shut down by Sauce and company?
I mean, he won't get shut down by Sauce because Sauce is going to probably spend a lot of time on Jefferson. But they have other good corners. They have a good secondary. That felt like a fluke game, if there ever was a fluke game. I'm not starting Adam Thielen this week.
Nah, this defense has been really tough against wide receivers. Thielen shows up once every few weeks. I'm not taking a chance on him. Commanders at Giants. Let's start with Terry McLaurin. How do you think he does against the G-Men this week?
2 really down games in a row. I'm starting to get nervous. Like, hey, you guys, you remember Taylor Heineke from 2021? You remember that guy? And Terry McLaurin? But it's not the worst matchup against the Giants. The defense hasn't been as good of late. I'm going to say not a must start. Like, I guess a good start.
Yeah, he kind of falls to that wide receiver 3 range. At least he's got a floor. Just when it looked like he was just, elevating, going back up to being elite wide receiver status. No, I mean, what a letdown against the Falcons last week. But you can't just bench him outright. I think he's still a decent start. And then Curtis Samuel also busted last week. Do you think he does better?
No, I can't start Curtis. He didn't even have a target last week. Like, what? Yeah, I mean, I know they didn't throw the ball a lot in that game, but even still, no targets. I can't start Curtis Samuel.
Well, here's the thing. Washington controlling the ground game. Obviously, Brian Robinson with a big game. But that's kind of what they've been doing, right? Heineke is just the game manager. They don't have to pass the ball. They're really not. Giants are worse against the run than the pass, so I don't see it really changing. So Samuel, really, really desperation flex. Now, on the other side, we do have Darius Slayton, still the number 1 receiver for the Giants. Does he do anything against this really much better Washington defense?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a lot better, but he's the number 1 guy here. We know he can always hit on a big play. He took a backseat to Richie James on Thanksgiving, but still, I think not a must start, but if you need him, you could start him.
Yeah, I kind of put him in a flex category here. Look, I haven't flexed out in a couple leagues because I like his upside, but I don't feel quite as good in this matchup. But I think you can still roll with him. Titans going to take on the Eagles. So let's start with the number 1 guy in Tennessee. That's Treylon Burks. He's been coming on lately. Kind of a fluky touchdown last week, of course. But do you think that the rookie can do anything against this Philly defense?
I mean, it's a really tough matchup, but he's getting like over a 20% target share since he's been back from IR. He's running a ton of routes. I mean, I feel like unlike last week where I did like him because I didn't think Tennessee would be able to run the ball, and they couldn't. They might be able to run the ball this week because the Eagles are bad against the run. So I'm going to put Burks only in the if you need him category.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to think it's going to be a lot of Derrick Henry this week and that he should smash. Look, Burks, again, I think you can flex him. I don't expect a big game, but again, he's kind of one of these fringe guys that might just be your best option. Now, you might notice, don't have A.J. Brown as a must-start anymore. He's been kind of mediocre the last couple weeks. Now, admittedly, he was banged up, had kind of an ankle issue a couple weeks ago. Apparently, he was sick, feeling ill during the game last week. Now, it's, I guess, a revenge game. I'm not sure who's getting revenge, though, because he just got paid. But anyways, A.J. Brown against his former team of Tennessee. I mean, do you still feel he's a must-start?
I do. I feel like, we know Tennessee, they're great against the run, bad against the pass. T. Higgins just torched this defense. T. Higgins basically torched them in a half because he had like 2 brutal drops in the first half, did nothing, and then torched them in the second half. I think if you got A.J. Brown, you got to start him.
Yeah, so we don't have him as like a no-brainer compared to some of those other elite receivers. You got to start A.J. Brown this week, I think, for sure. Maybe not next week, but we'll see. And then Devontae Smith, what about him?
Again, he's one of these guys. It's a good matchup against Tennessee. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball as much. So, not a must start, but I still think he's one of these guys. He's still a good start.
Yeah, one of those players you kind of hate to keep on your bench in case he goes off. He hasn't had a really blow-up game lately, but he's been solid. It's a good matchup on paper. I feel pretty good about him. I'll put him actually probably in the low-end wide receiver 2 range for this week. Seahawks at the Rams. Let's start with DK Metcalf. Huge target share last week. Now, the Rams are admittedly a harder matchup defensively. What do you think he does?
Yeah, I bet he's getting so many targets. And, the interesting thing is he's not being used primarily down the field. Like he gets a lot of shorter targets, intermediate targets, which is good because it helps him, rack up more catches. So I'm going to say if you got DK Metcalf, you start him.
Yeah, still a solid start. Don't expect a huge game. Look, last week also he was really close to a couple of touchdowns, got targeted in the end zone, almost came away with them. So huge numbers, but that was the Raiders. This is a much tougher matchup with Jalen Ramsey's there. I know this is not the Rams of last year, but defensively it's still not a cakewalk. But you can't put him lower than a wide receiver 2. So I think if you got DK Metcalf, you still have to start him. And then what about Tyler Lockett? I think he's probably kind of right there too.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly like DK Metcalf more, but I mean, if you got Lockett, you almost have to start him every week because, again, he has the potential to just go off. So I think if you got Lockett, you're starting him.
Yeah, I agree. This matchup, I actually might like Lockett a little bit better just because he'll be the slot guy. Might get a little bit less press coverage. Some guys on the inside won't pay as much attention to him. And look, Kenneth Walker is still something they're going to have to factor in. The Seahawks offense is pretty good and balanced. So I like Lockett. And then the Rams, I mean, I guess let's talk about Van Jefferson. He's like the last man standing, and he barely just came back a couple of weeks ago off IR. So can we play Van Jefferson?
No, I know he scored last week, but I'm not banking on that again. It's probably going to be Bryce Perkins again. No, I'm not starting Van Jefferson.
Yeah, this feels like a team that really just wants the season to be over. Cannot touch this offense. All right, Dolphins at the Niners. You got 2 studs in Miami who you have to start. Debo's not a must start anymore. He really hasn't been for most of the year. Does that change in this matchup?
Maybe. I mean, we know the Miami defense, is susceptible in the secondary to the pass. But I can't say you have to start Debo if you have him. But I think this week in this matchup, he's a good start.
Yeah, I mean, if he's healthy, again, a guy that you hate to bench, but just be prepared to be let down because Debo of last year doesn't look like he's here this year. But I think he's still a solid start. And then you have Brandon Ayuk. I mean, I said it before. I'll just keep saying it. I feel like you just roll with him, set and forget. I think you have to start him.
Yeah, again, I can't go as high as must start, but I think he's a good start in this matchup.
Chiefs at Bengals should be an exciting game, hoping for a lot of points. Does Juju Smith-Schuster get involved? Hopefully a lot more involved than he did last week.
Yeah, that was pretty disappointing, but I mean, I feel like you have to just put Juju in your lineup and take what you get. He's basically the number one wide receiver here, attached to Patrick Mahomes. Not a must start, but if you got him, he's a good start.
I'm going to agree. Good start, but kind of hard to know exactly what you're getting, especially when Kelsey's just dominating. And then let's talk about Sky Moore. He's starting to come on more lately. Do you think that he keeps seeing his snap rate and his target share go up?
I hope so, but I'm not ready to start him yet. He's still too far away from that. I'm sitting Sky Moore.
Yeah, I think you'd have to have a lot of buys or injuries to put Moore in your lineup or be in a very deep league. But definitely worth noting the fact that he is getting used a little bit more, but I'm still not starting him either. Chargers get the pleasure of taking on the Raiders defense this coming week. What does that mean for Keenan Allen?
I mean, you got to start Keenan Allen in this matchup. He's been really good the last 2 weeks. If you got Keenan, you're starting him.
Yeah, to me, it seems too obvious. Keenan is a no doubt must start this week for sure. Now, what about Josh Palmer? Took a little bit of a step back last week, even though Mike Williams was still out. How do you feel about Palmer?
If Mike Williams is out again, then Palmer is a guy you can start him if you need him.
Yeah, I think he's still startable, but again, no higher than a flex. Again, just depends on your other options. And then Mike Williams, is this week he comes back? And if so, are you willing to take that chance again that he maybe doesn't last the whole game?
Yeah, after getting burned last time, I think even if he comes back and, it's going to be so hard to bench Mike Williams in this matchup, but man, I need to see him get through a game first, so I'm not starting Mike Williams if I don't have to.
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, it's such a good spot for him if he does play. I mean, I don't know. I'll say if he's good to go and they clear him, he's playing with no limitations, I kind of feel like I have to put him in my lineup. To me, it's worth the chance. And then on the Raiders side, Mac Hollins had himself a decent game last week. Does he continue that against the Chargers?
I mean, he definitely could against the Chargers. He's been fairly good recently, so I'm going to say not a must start, but if you need him, you can start him.
Yeah, he had kind of a mini slump when he kind of fell out of favor, but this is not a bad spot for him either. I say that he's at least on the flex radar. You put him against a guy like Josh Palmer. I'd say I prefer Palmer a little bit more, but Hollins, in a pinch, you could use him. Indianapolis going to take on Dallas. Let's start with Michael Pittman. Do you think he can do anything against this really tough Dallas defense?
It is a tough defense, but Pittman to me is one of those guys. I mean, we were a little worried about him a couple weeks ago against Philly. He came through. I think he can come through. If you got Michael Pittman, you're starting him.
Yeah, I feel like he's a little bit above those flex options we've talked about. Maybe low-end wide receiver 3, but I'm not too scared, at least in terms of individual matchups. So I'll say Pittman is startable. And then Paris Campbell, what do you think?
I liked him last week in a great matchup. Not a good matchup this week. Doesn't really have a lot of upside. I'm going to sit Campbell this week.
Yeah, this is a guy who really needs that beneficial matchup in order to be fantasy relevant. Yeah, this is a week I will pass on Paris. And then Michael Gallup had his best game. He actually made some really tough catches this last week. Looked good. Not getting those really deep downfield targets, but do you think that he's maybe kind of getting some of his mojo back?
Maybe, but not enough for me to trust him in my lineup yet. I'm still sitting Michael Gallup.
Yeah, I think the problem is there's still a little bit too much competition there. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb, number one. Dalton Schultz at tight end, getting those touchdowns. Got 2 good running backs. He's really just a flex only if you need to. And then Monday Night Football will be the New Orleans Saints taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's talk Chris Olave. I mean, God, I wish he had a better quarterback thrown to him, but how do you feel he'll do, presumably with Andy Dalton again this week?
Yeah, this is a fairly tough spot. I know Amari Cooper had a nice game, but again, he had to took a huge reception in overtime, and he's got Andy Dalton. I can't say he's a must start this week. I'm going to say he's a good start, but not a must start this week.
Yeah, it's not the best matchup for him. Again, he always has that upside, but man, this whole offense has looked really bad lately. So I'm gonna err towards saying he's only a flex at best. And then Jarvis Landry. I mean, we can't start Jarvis Landry, can we?
No, not starting Jarvis Landry.
Again, I feel like with a better quarterback there, he would be viable, but he's just not. Now, Mike Evans also has been knocked down a tier because not a no doubt must start anymore. What do you think about him against New Orleans, which he at times has struggled against historically?
Yeah, it depends. Does Marshawn Lattimore finally make it back this week? I mean, this is probably the week Lattimore will come back, right? Because he's like, okay, it's Mike Evans. I'm back. I'm ready. But, I mean, it'd be so hard for me to bench Mike Evans, but I can't put him, obviously not in the must start, but I'm still going to put him in the good start.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's still a high-end wide receiver too, a really good start. Look, maybe Chris Godwin kind of takes over as the lead guy, but so what? Mike Evans is still Mike Evans. I'm not that worried about him. I'd say he's pretty much a must start unless your team is stacked. And then what about Chris Godwin? Do you feel better about him than Evans now?
I mean, you got to based on what we've seen the last 2 weeks. So I think if you got Godwin, you are definitely starting Chris Godwin.
Yeah, at this point, again, what we're waiting for, him to get right. Imagine how coincidental it is that right after the bye week, he looks much better. He got some rest. He's a really good receiver. You got to start him. All right, now you know which wide receivers you should start or sit, but you need to know about running back, quarterback, tight end as well. We got you covered. Check out our Week 13 playlist with all the fantasy advice you need to win.